In a small, picturesque village nestled among rolling hills and meandering streams, there lived a man named Tobias. To the outside world, he appeared to be an upstanding and affluent member of the community, but behind closed doors, he harbored a dark secret. Tobias was the cruel owner of a local textile mill, and his ruthless business practices had earned him a notorious reputation. Tobias had inherited the mill from his father, who had built the family fortune on the backs of countless workers. The mill was the lifeblood of the village, providing employment to most of its residents, and yet it was also a source of immense suffering. Under Tobias's rule, the workers endured unbearable conditions and pitiful wages, often barely enough to feed their families. The mill's workers toiled from sunrise to sunset, their hands perpetually stained with the dyes and chemicals used in the textile production. The factory floor was a cacophony of clattering machines and stifling heat, and the air was thick with cotton fibers that clogged the workers' lungs. Safety measures were non-existent, and accidents were common, with injured workers receiving no compensation. Tobias's cruelty extended beyond the factory floor. He was known to be a heartless landlord, charging exorbitant rents for the substandard housing he owned. Many families were trapped in debt, their meager wages barely enough to cover their basic needs, let alone the rent. Some resorted to sending their children to work in the mill, perpetuating the cycle of poverty and exploitation. Tobias's obsession with wealth and power was insatiable. He cut corners whenever possible, using the cheapest materials and refusing to invest in safer machinery. His callous disregard for the well-being of his workers and the quality of his products did not go unnoticed, and whispers of discontent circulated throughout the village. One evening, a group of courageous workers gathered secretly to discuss their grievances. They were led by a young woman named Eliza, whose fiery spirit and compassion for her fellow laborers made her a natural leader. Eliza and her allies dreamed of improving their lives and those of their families, and they knew that the time for change had come. The workers, united by their shared suffering, began to organize strikes and protests. They demanded better wages, safer working conditions, and an end to the exploitative rents charged by Tobias. News of their actions reached the neighboring villages, and sympathetic supporters from all walks of life joined their cause. As the protests grew in size and intensity, the village and the textile mill became the epicenter of a brewing labor movement. National and international attention focused on Tobias and his cruel practices, and the pressure to change began to mount. Tobias, however, remained defiant. He used his wealth and influence to push back against the workers' demands, resorting to intimidation and even violence. He hired enforcers to break up protests and paid off local authorities to maintain his grip on power. The struggle between Tobias, the cruel owner, and the workers seeking justice intensified. It was a battle of wills, a fight for the soul of the village, and it seemed that only one side could prevail. As the villagers and their allies continued to rally against Tobias, they drew strength from their unity and their unwavering belief in a better future. The outcome of this epic struggle would determine whether cruelty and exploitation would persist, or whether compassion and justice would ultimately triumph.